Hello, Facebook. Happy Thursday. We have so much to talk about in this week's newsletter that I will probably miss some stuff, which is yet another reason to sign up for the newsletter if you haven't, because I'll try to stick some extra stuff in there. Plus, it'll have pictures. The thing I wanted to start off with is how I started my morning, which was today a meeting of the Litchfield County Opiate Task Force, which is coordinated by Maria Kutan-Skinner at McCall Behavioral Health. And I just, she and all of those working in that task force always start with an inspirational quote. And so I just wanted to read this quote, which is from Paul Farmer. And it's, "With rare exceptions, all of your most important achievements on this planet will come from working with others, or in a word, partnership." And obviously this task force was brought together to try to address a painful scourge striking our communities and communities throughout the country. But there is a powerful positivity of watching and being part of that group at work. There were at least 75 people in that room by my rough count, all of whom are actively involved, hands-on in addressing substance abuse and opiate abuse in particular, sharing ideas. The generosity, intelligence, commitment, dedication, expertise, skill on display in that room is a powerful thing. And everybody in that room was part of it and listening attentively and contributing and adding information. And I can help you with this, and I can connect you to this person, and she's got good information here. It is a powerful thing to be a part of, and there were moments when Maria and others in particular really highlighted that some of this is the very particular strength of our communities, and that not all communities in the country or in the state have this constructive an approach. In particular, that some of the really positive things that are happening in this world, particularly in prevention, come out of the nonprofits in our area. McCall, also the Foundation for Community Health, led by Nancy Heaton. There is deep knowledge and skills in the leadership of these organizations. Berkshire Taconic, the Northwest Connecticut Community Fund, that are skilled, knowledgeable, and also committing resources to important prevention programs. In particular, we had another meeting recently that was highlighting some of the successes of a program called the BOTVIN protocol, which is in place in Region 1 in the schools, which teaches kids ways to handle stress that can keep them off the pathway of substance abuse and teach them other skills and resilience and ways to assert themselves that are healthy. And that it was spearheaded by a lot of local nonprofits who are deeply knowledgeable in this area, and then supported by private philanthropy. And I am hoping to push for expanding this to other parts of the state with hopefully some help from the state to get this in place, because it's really, we have some great data to support how it's working. It's also will start in Region 7 soon. So that was a really positive thing from this morning, which displayed the strength of our community. But it's important to note that meeting ended really painfully. One of the counselors in the room stepped out during the meeting and came back into the meeting to tell us that someone that he had been working closely with for the last 6 months died that morning. So it was a really searing ending to the meeting, in which this counselor in particular stressed the importance for him of being able to be with that group of supportive people who are also trying to fight this and who understand it's the scale of this issue and the stigma associated with it for those suffering and for those families. So I just wanted to highlight that as we all try to work together on a variety of things, that we need each other, and particularly in our small towns, our lives are woven into one another's in ways that maybe aren't always the case in other places, which is why, a 5-minute walk to the post office can take you 45 minutes, because we run into our neighbors. Runs that I used to take solo for an hour, I now stop and talk to people along the way, or people stop me and talk along the way, and I love that. So it is. And I'm also going to share in the newsletter, there have been a series of articles recently showing an interesting trend, which is an uptick in rural populations, people coming back to rural towns. And I have to wonder whether that connection, which is missing in our lives and other, in a lot of social study about alienation and lack of connection, that returning to our kinds of towns can provide that. And so I will provide a link to at least one of those articles in the newsletter. So the other thing that has been much in the news is, yes, the meals tax / grocery tax, which was pretty a source of grave, disappointment, outrage. You can use different terms. So to review here, some of you may remember that the governor's budget originally proposed did have a grocery tax in it. And we, the legislature, responded pretty much with one voice saying no. And we expressly rejected a grocery tax. So we did not pass a grocery tax. And more to that point in a minute. What we did pass was an increase, a small increase in the the prepared food tax or the meals tax. And just as a little aside here, that tax does sometimes, previously, this is not new, apply in grocery stores for the very simple example of this. So take in North Canaan, you buy a pastry and a coffee at Blackberry River Cafe. That's taxable because it's a meal. May not be a whole meal, but actually their pastries are pretty good. You can eat them as a meal. If you buy a pastry across the street at Stop and Shop, that didn't used to be taxable. And in a sense of fairness, this prepared foods tax has been in the past, should apply to that pastry and that coffee that you buy in the grocery store as well. So that there's fairness between that bakery and that grocery store. What happened in this case, so we passed a very small increase in that prepared food tax. There's a state agency called the Department of Revenue Services whose job it is to interpret the legislation of the state. And they took this opportunity to greatly enhance the definition or expand the definition of prepared foods, which was expressly not the intent of the legislature. So what do you do when a state agency issues directives or an interpretation that is directly contrary to the intent of the legislature? Well, my initial response is not to go on social media. My response is to do something about it. So I contacted my leadership, and we, in fact, I believe the letter was unanimous from every member of our caucus to the governor saying, this is not what we intended and you need to fix it. And the governor has responded and said he will. And we are working with the Department of Revenue Services to return their interpretation of prepared foods back to what it was previously, because this is not what we passed. And if they're going to interpret our laws in a way that is contrary to what we intended, then we're going to change it. So stay tuned to see how that rolls out. But so far, I don't hear any disagreement on that, because we are the legislature. We passed this, and we get to have it mean what we said it was going to mean. So stay tuned. I also got some, as some of you may have been receiving, my sort of end of season summary letter. And one of the things, it was hard to, I had about twice as much information as I wanted to stuff into it. And I'm usually warned to sort of pare it down a little bit. So one of the things I realized that I probably had less information about than I should have is our pension restructuring, which we did address this year. I will put a little bit more information about this in the newsletter and hopefully link to an earlier, more detailed letter that I wrote much earlier when we passed the budget. But in essence, we had a surplus this year, and that enabled us to put a substantial amount of money on deposit, in effect, to shore up the pension system, which allows us to even out our payment stream over future years, so that the government can be more predictable and not be effectively squeezed entirely by unsustainable stream of payments. So to review a few events, I want to highlight a few things. One, I met a colleague recently at the Kent Falls Brewery in Kent, where we shared an awkward hug, which is a beer, actually a Pilsner, I think. No, I don't know. Maybe it's an IPA. Sorry, I'm betraying my lack of beer. My colleague was a much more knowledgeable beer person, so I let him make the choices. But if you have the chance to go out there, please stop by. It's a really fun place and very creative. I came home with a 4-pack of Awkward Hug and some Trapped in Habitual Nostalgia was the name of another one. So it's fun and very beautiful to be out there. Of course, we also had the Cornwall Ag Fair, which is always fun. Lots of delicious food on display. As I think I mentioned before, I did my grocery shopping for the week at the Cornwall Ag Fair, which was really fun. And lots of great local organizations out on display, meeting and chatting and collaborating, which was always fantastic. And I also I have in the past participated in a run for Miles for Mo. That's to benefit Camp Mo, which is a terrific camp in Torrington for kids of all kinds of ability. I think from ages 5 to 15. And they have a really beautiful camp out in Torrington, and one of the things they do to raise money for it is this run. And you may notice I'm being a little careful about my words because I did it backwards. Because I didn't have time to stick around for the race itself, I ran first, and then I went to Camp Mo and registered for the race and hung out and talked with people. But it's always great to be over there and supporting them. I also want to thank Henry Grunlack, who of Norfolk Lumber in Norfolk, with whom I spent some time both at his lumberyard with his brother Rick, and also with him to Great Mountain Forest in Norfolk, where we visited Kevin Massey and saw him at work in the forest there. And it was both Henry and Kevin are part of the great tradition of our ag program at Housatonic, and to see Henry's commitment to that program and to the young people that he has worked with over the years is a really powerful thing. And we chatted about all kinds of stuff while we were walking around and shared he was quoting one of his mentors to say, "You learn with your ears, not with your mouth." And we both share that's a much better way. I got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And Kevin Massey, of course, is one of the really fine examples of a recent graduate from Housatonic's ag program. And it was great to talk to him about what he's doing and his leadership in the forestry industry. So thanks to both of you for taking time to spend with me. I want to highlight a few future things. One, I am working on an event which I'm hoping to hold in North Canaan in late October. I'll get you the details later, but about prescription drugs. We have done work in the legislature recently to try to bend that cost. The cost of prescription drugs has been climbing at just unsustainable rates. And so Connecticut is trying to act to affect that, and we have done things this term and last term, and so I'm bringing the Attorney General and some leading legislators who have been working on this to North Canaan for an event and trying to figure out who else we should have there to talk about that, but stay tuned for that. I get to go to a ribbon cutting for Torrington Middle School this coming week on Monday, which I'm excited for. I am also doing, I have been touring a number of correctional facilities in Connecticut, and I have another tour this week, which I'm looking forward to because you do learn a lot by actually being present. And then I wanted to close with some more loss. Unfortunately, we lost we lose too many. You read, sadly, nearly in every edition of the paper, someone else to opiate addiction, which is what I began this with, which is pretty painful. This week, we lost Cokie Roberts, who's a national figure. I don't know about you, but I grew up listening to Cokie Roberts, and although I didn't know her personally, it feels personal because she was a woman that I looked up to greatly when I was a young woman trying to figure out how to be in the world, and she was a voice of wisdom and authority and humor, and I always enjoyed her. And then I personally, many of you know Joe Jacklish, who died recently, and I may be mispronouncing his last name, and I apologize for that because I knew him always only as Joe of the Roast, who always had a smile, a song. He made you feel welcome everywhere, anytime you were in his space, even when he was in the end of his long illness. He made it feel like he was taking care of you, and so there's a celebration of life for him in Salisbury, which I'll post some information for any of you who might be interested. That's this weekend on Sunday. So that's sad. We miss people when they leave us in our communities, but we try to keep them with us in our hearts. So thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend. See you soon. Bye.